My name is Vesper Hale, 35 years old. Raleigh Hall glowed like a memory that refused to fade. Crystal chandeliers breathing gold across polished floors, portraits of men with oil-slick smiles, the hum of cutlery and money. A young waiter with a starch-stiff bow tie guided me past the river of sequins and cufflinks to a table near the emergency exit. The leg a touch uneven, so the whole thing breathed when I did. On the plate, a single slice of bread, white and dry enough to whisper when I touched it. I didn't touch it. From across the room, Karen clocked me like she was measuring fabric. One quick, slit-eyed pass. She drifted over, silk whispering against itself. Up close, she smelled like cold citrus and a decision already made. "That's all you deserve," she murmured, eyelids dipped. Shannon arrived a half-beat later, glittered and easy, in a way that always made me feel like I'd been cast as the wrong sister. "Always invisible, Vess," she said, using the nickname she'd borrowed just to bruise it. "Try not to embarrass us tonight." Her smile was camera-ready, only the eyes cut. No one at the main tables looked up. Dad, Gregory to everyone here, was 2 clusters away, shaking hands as if he had more bones there than in his entire spine. When he laughed, it didn't reach his eyes. His right hand trembled once, a tremor so small I might have imagined it. He clasped it with the left like a man pocketing a secret. I laced my fingers in my lap and let the room perform itself. The MC warmed the crowd, the string quartet tested something tender, and a woman in pearls studied me the way people study weather. Will it pass, or will it ruin the party? I had come prepared to be weather. The USB in my pocket felt heavier than it was, not because of the plastic, but because of the rooms it contained. Private, ugly, unguarded. 2 weeks ago, Ellen had sprawled on my studio couch, knees up, sketch pad digging into her thighs, and told me she'd overheard Shannon at a Fayetteville Street cafe. It was the voice I knew from childhood dares and teenage alibis, but this time hushed and smug. "It's all set, Kyle. The shares will be mine soon." That night, Ellen had remembered a shared cloud she'd set up for Shannon ages ago, when Shannon was playing brand director for a boutique that never paid her invoices on time. Same login, insultingly unchanged. We went into it together, my room lit by the blue aquarium glow of my monitors, coffee sweating into old rings. Most of it was fluff, fittings, lunches, hashtags. Then we found the thread with Kyle Ramsey. "Make sure the papers are ready," Shannon wrote. "Dad won't suspect a thing." "Karen's got the lawyer lined up," Kyle replied. I'd screenshotted everything like a good medic at a chaotic scene. And then Ellen, heart in her throat but hands steady, followed Shannon to a bar and slid into the booth behind her. She recorded the audio with the mic cupped inside her palm. Shannon's voice, bright, brittle, cut through the clatter. "Once Dad signs, it's ours. He trusts Karen too much." Kyle's laugh was a match struck in a dry room. He's got no idea. When Ellen sent me the clip, I sat very still and felt something I didn't have a word for, rage braided tightly with grief. This wasn't about me being kept off the main table anymore. This was my father's life's work, the scaffolding of the house we grew up in, being prepped like a patient for a procedure he didn't consent to. I knew the case had holes. That cloud access was a locked door opened with a key we weren't supposed to still have. Chain of custody could be a noose if someone wanted it to be. But I also knew secrets rot more than they protect. I kept replaying my mother's face in the old photos, her hand on my head, my mouth pink with sugar. She'd been gone since I was 5, and after that, the house had changed its rules. Karen arrived, Shannon orbiting. I learned to leave rooms before I was asked to. I filmed empty playgrounds at 16 because absent things were honest in a way people weren't. "Champagne?" A waiter paused near my shoulder. His tray was a shining lake. He looked at my table setting, at the desert of the single bread slice, and then past me, toward the head table where Karen's gaze was a posted sign. He moved on. "Vesper!" The voice landed beside me. Ellen, in a black dress with a paint-splattered scarf she refused to retire, slid into the empty chair with a conspirator's ease. She placed her hand over mine for one count. "You okay?" "I've been worse." I tried to smile and felt the old stiffness of the mask. "Is our guy set?" She tipped her chin toward the AV booth. The kid I'd slipped $20 and a promise of a future credit stood inside, white as printer paper, fingers hovering over sliders like they were live wires. He glanced down at the console. For a second, his brows pinched. "He says the system just auto-mounted another drive," Ellen whispered. "He's probably spooked, or someone else has plugged something in." I felt the first clean shiver of doubt. "Can he still run ours?" "He can if you ask him to," she said, recovering her grin, but her foot jittered under the table. "We've got redundancy, remember?" Redundancy. A second USB tucked in the satin pocket at my hip. A ghost of the first, in case anyone decided to turn truth into a technicality. I breathed through the knot in my chest. Across the room, Matthew Stone, stone by name, granite by bearing, watched the crowd as if he were scouting a field before a controlled burn. Senior partner at Stone & Associates. Dad's would-be savior with the numbers that could make or unmake empires without lifting his voice. He raised a glass, expression unreadable. People the city respected took their emotional cues from him. If he flinched, everyone would. Karen floated to the podium when the MC introduced her. She had a way of making the dress wear her, of inhabiting silk like it was born knowing her measurements. "Family," she began, and I watched a muscle leap in Dad's cheek, that small right-hand tremor returning. "Loyalty. Legacy." She poured the words like syrup, then ladled memories that did not include me. Giggles over holiday menus with Shannon, silent nods of support at board meetings with Gregory. She wove a tapestry in which I was, at best, a loose thread you tuck behind the frame. I told myself not to look at Dad, and failed. When his eyes finally slid to my corner, it was like spotting a lighthouse you weren't sure was really there. He didn't smile, he didn't frown, he just held, and in the holding, I thought I saw a question, something like, "Are you sure?" My heart drummed in my throat. I was sure of the rot, less sure of my method. If I set fire to a house to prove it was infested, what would that make me? Then I remembered the draft agreement with Karen's signature, the line items smooth as a razor, reallocation of majority shares, transfer upon signatory approval, buried in routine paperwork language. I remembered Dad's trust like a habit he couldn't break. Karen finished to applause that sounded like it had been trained. The MC's voice rode the air. "If anyone else has a few words for Gregory, now's the moment." The room did its little collective inhale. I stood. My chair creaked. My table wobbled and then steadied, as if deciding to believe in me. Ellen's hand left mine and found my elbow, not to stop me, just to send me forward. I walked the aisle between linen and ease, between people who taught their children which forks meant which futures. At the booth, the AV kid's throat worked. Up close, he had the face of every terrified intern I'd once been. I reached into my pocket, felt the cool ridges of the USB, and set it in his hand. "Play it," I said, low enough to make it our secret. On the console screen, a small icon blinked as if waking. He nodded. For just a heartbeat, he glanced at an open port I had not used. I turned to the crowd. The first image flickered onto the screen behind me, pixels resolving into words I had memorized. "Make sure the papers are ready. Dad won't suspect a thing." Somewhere in the room, a glass met a tabletop hard enough to ring. Somewhere else, a breath shortened to a knife. I didn't move. I let the electric hush take shape around me, and in that hush, I heard the smallest sound, the tremor of my father's right hand against the stem of his flute. "Let's watch something real," I said, and the lights fell a fraction as the screen brightened. I held the breath before the blow and didn't let it go. The screen's glow washed over the hall, draining it of its champagne warmth. Faces turned pale, stretched by the flickering light. The text messages magnified, each word sharp as a blade. "Shannon, make sure the papers are ready. Dad won't suspect a thing. Kyle, Karen's got the lawyer lined up." A few guests gasped softly, uncertain if it was a prank or an avant-garde toast. Karen froze mid-step, her perfect smile cracking like thin ice. "Turn that off," she said, her voice too calm. "This isn't—" The next slide silenced her. An audio waveform appeared, then Shannon's voice. Smug, familiar. "Once Dad signs, it's ours. He trusts Karen too much." Kyle's laugh followed. "He's got no idea." The room erupted in whispers. You could hear fabric rustling, glasses hitting tables too fast, the sound of reputation tearing itself apart. Dad stood slowly, eyes scanning the screen, then landing on me. What is this?" His voice was dry gravel. Karen lunged for the console, but the AV kid flinched back. I caught his eye and shook my head. "Keep it playing," I whispered. My voice didn't shake, though every muscle wanted to. Then came the document, projected large, crisp, undeniable. Transfer of shares. Agreement. Signatures. Karen Foster and Shannon Foster. Already there, the lines for Gregory Hale left blank but prepared. The silence was so heavy the chandeliers seemed to hum. Karen's voice finally rose, shrill, cracking the stillness. "Turn it off!" She spun toward me. "You had no right." I cut her off. "You had no right to steal from him." The word steal hung in the air like smoke. Shannon's face blanched. "It's a draft," she snapped, her confidence slipping. "You hacked my files, Vesper. This is illegal." "Then sue me," I said evenly. "I'll see you in court with this audio." Across the room, a man in a tailored navy suit rose from the main table. His voice, smooth but edged, carried easily. "Gregory," he said, addressing my father, "we've done business for years. I've admired your integrity, but this—" He gestured to the screen. "This looks like fraud within your family. We can't proceed under these circumstances." Matthew Stone, Stone and Associates. The merger was gone with that one quiet pronouncement. The crowd reacted like a field of grass in the wind. First murmurs, then open ripples of shock. Karen turned to him, desperate. "Matthew, please, this is a misunderstanding. It's an internal family matter." But he was already gathering his notes, his team standing behind him. "We're done here." I looked at Dad. For the first time in years, he wasn't looking through me. He was looking at me, his face a map of confusion, betrayal, and something I hadn't seen since childhood. Fear. "You did this?" he asked softly, as if needing confirmation. "I had to," I said. "They were using you, Dad. You needed to see it." Karen's composure shattered. "She's lying. She's always been jealous. She made this video." The guests didn't believe her. You could see it in their faces. Moneyed people who could smell deceit better than perfume. Then, from the back of the hall, a sudden commotion. Kyle Ramsey stumbled in, cheeks red, tie undone. He hadn't expected to walk into a war zone. "Karen, Shannon, stop!" he shouted, hands up. "It's true, okay? They planned it all. I just followed orders." The room broke open. Voices overlapped. Someone dropped a glass. Others took out their phones. Karen grabbed Kyle's sleeve, hissing, "You idiot, shut up!" He pulled free. Dad's voice cut through the chaos, low, shaking. "Explain this," he said, stepping toward her. "Now." Shannon started to cry, but even that sounded rehearsed. "Dad, please, it wasn't supposed to go this far. Karen said you were tired of managing the company, that you wanted to simplify." "By lying to me?" His tone was raw, stripped of the businessman armor. "You forged my trust." Karen's face twisted, the practice calm gone. "Gregory, listen to me. You're not well lately. You've been forgetting things. I was protecting you." That hit the room like a slap. People gasped. The woman in pearls whispered, "She's trying to paint him as senile." Dad stiffened. "I remember everything," he said coldly, "including the day I let you into my home." He turned away from her, looking at the crowd, at me, at everything he'd built, now unraveling in public. His hand trembled again, faint but visible, as if the truth itself weighed too much. Karen reached for him. "Please." He stepped back. "Don't." The music had stopped hours ago, but in the silence, the air pulsed with aftershocks. Guests began leaving, heels clacking like verdicts. Matthew Stone's team was already gone. One by one, the people who'd smiled at Karen for years turned away without a word. Shannon faced me across the wreckage, her mascara streaked. "You ruined everything," she spat. "No," I said quietly, "you did that yourself." Karen's voice came again, smaller this time, trembling. "You'll regret this, Vesper. You think truth makes you strong, but it leaves you alone." Her words cut sharper than I expected, maybe because part of me knew she wasn't entirely wrong. Truth isolates before it frees. The hall emptied. The chandeliers flickered once and steadied. I stood on the same spot where, moments earlier, I'd decided to burn my silence. My breath finally came back to me, shaky but real. Across the room, Dad lingered, staring at the frozen screen, the words still glowing faintly. "Dad won't suspect a thing." He touched the back of a chair, grounding himself. Without looking at me, he said quietly, almost to himself, There's a document you don't know about." I froze. What document? But he didn't answer. He just walked out through the side doors, shoulders squared like a man walking into an old storm. The screen behind me dimmed to black. The whispers followed him out. And in the empty hall, with only the buzz of the projectors left, I stood there, half victorious, half haunted, realizing I might have exposed more than I understood. 3 weeks passed before I saw my father again. The headlines had already done their work. Raleigh real estate icon faces family betrayal, merger collapses amid scandal. Karen's pearls had disappeared from charity photos, Shannon's marketing firm dissolved overnight, and the once gilded Hale family name now lived in whispers at country clubs. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I woke up most mornings with the same hollow hum behind my ribs, like my body hadn't caught up to the idea of peace. The company went under faster than anyone predicted, with Stone and Associates gone, investors scattered, and Dad's business, 40 years of meetings and mortgages, folded in on itself. When I called his office, the line was dead. One evening, Ellen dropped by my apartment, barefoot as always, holding 2 coffees and a thick envelope. "Mail for you," she said, tossing it onto my editing table, cluttered with film reels and unpaid bills. The return address read, Law Offices of Cartwright and Day. I slid it open. Inside, a notice of intent. Karen Foster versus Vesper Hale. Claims: defamation, data breach, violation of privacy. The phrase computer intrusion was bolded, like it wanted to punch through the page. I read it twice, then set it down. My mouth went dry. "She's actually suing?" Ellen asked, pacing. "She's threatening," I said, trying to sound steady. "She wants to scare me, make me look like the criminal." Ellen stopped pacing. "Vess, you used that shared cloud I set up for Shannon. If they dig into metadata..." "I know." I pinched the bridge of my nose. "But if I hadn't, no one would know what they did." Silence. The kind that stretches friendship thin. "You'd do it again, wouldn't you?" she asked softly. I looked at her. "I think I already did, every time I pressed record on someone else's pain." She didn't answer. She didn't have to. That night, I couldn't edit. Couldn't even sleep. The monitor's glow painted the walls pale blue as I opened an old folder on my hard drive. Mom's Things. It held scanned photos, one shaky video from a camcorder, and a subfolder labeled Documents, Notarized. I'd never opened it. Inside was a PDF, dated 1996, 3 years before Karen moved in. Last Will and Contingency Trust, Claudia Hale. I skimmed it, my heart thudding. In dense legal phrasing, one clause stood out. In the event that Gregory Hale remarries, any minor or dependent offspring of Claudia Hale shall retain protection and equitable share in all business assets, unless explicitly nullified by independent legal counsel unaffiliated with said spouse. The notary's stamp glowed faintly through the screen. My mother had tried to protect me before I even knew what I'd need protecting from. I scrolled further and froze. A ratification amendment, signed 12 years later, listed Karen Hale as witness. The date was off by 3 months from the one on file at Dad's office. Different handwriting, same lawyer's name. A quiet forgery buried in paperwork. I sat back, hands shaking. The puzzle shifted again. The USB had revealed their theft, but this was a foundation they'd built it on. I called Ellen. "She didn't just manipulate Dad into signing over shares," I said. "She rewrote Mom's clause. It's been in motion for years." Ellen swore under her breath. "You need to show him that. He won't take my calls." "Then you go to him." The next afternoon, I drove out of the city, past the towers, past the half-built condos with my family's old logo still ghosted on their fences, past the rows of for-lease signs leaning like wilted flowers. Dad had moved into a lakeside cabin, something modest, rented, quiet. The kind of place a man goes when pride collapses and he's too tired to rebuild. He answered the door looking smaller, hair more gray than I remembered. Still wearing a pressed shirt, though, as if some part of him refused to surrender formality. "Vesper." His voice carried surprise, maybe caution. "Hi, Dad." We stood in the doorway for a breath too long. He stepped aside. "Come in." The cabin smelled of wood smoke and old paper. A fishing rod leaned in the corner. On the table, a stack of unopened envelopes and a single manila folder marked Legal Confidential. He caught me looking at it, then at the document in my hands. I laid Mom's will on the table, the forged amendment beneath it. "She changed this. Karen forged Mom's clause to void my inheritance protection. The dates don't match. Dad's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes did. A wince, maybe. He reached into his own folder and slid out a document I'd never seen. I know, he said quietly. I blinked. You what? I found discrepancies months ago. I hired an outside consultant, didn't tell Karen, but I didn't confront her. Why not? He looked out the window, the lake catching late sunlight. Because I thought if I ignored it, she'd stop. Because I didn't want another war in the house. Your mother, his voice caught. She believed confrontation breaks more than it mends. I swallowed hard. She also believed in telling the truth. He nodded, eyes glistening. You're her daughter. You did what I couldn't. The words landed like a benediction and a curse at once. Then his hand trembled again, the same small shake I'd noticed at the party. This time he noticed me noticing. Don't look like that, he said gently. It's nerves. Stress. I'm seeing someone about it. I wanted to believe him. We talked for an hour. About the company, the scandal, the lawsuit. About Karen's venomous calls he no longer answered. At one point he said quietly, I still don't know how to forgive you for the way you exposed us, but I'm grateful you did. When I left, the sky was bruised purple, the lake a mirror of broken stars. Back home, Ellen was waiting, sketching half-heartedly. Well? He knew, I said. He's known for months. He even had his own document protecting me if something like this ever happened. Then why didn't he stop them? Because guilt is quieter than greed, I said, slipping the forged amendment into a folder. But it lasts longer. That night, I got an email. Anonymous address. Subject line, police report filed. Computer intrusion complaint. Attached, a scanned copy of the complaint. The signature at the bottom was Karen Hale. She'd gone through with it. And my father's quiet promise, there's a document you don't know about, suddenly sounded less like a confession and more like a warning. The next morning, I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing against the kitchen counter. Again and again, until the vibration began to sound like panic. It was Ellen. They filed it, she said without preamble. Karen's complaint hit the system last night. It's official. Cyber intrusion, privacy violation, intent to defame. Vesper, they're calling it a criminal case. I pressed a hand against the counter, the laminate cool under my palm. Did they name you too? A pause, then... No, only you. My throat tightened. That doesn't make sense. The login came from your old shared cloud. Yeah, well, it also pinged your IP address, the same Wi-Fi network you've been using for weeks. I stared at the router light blinking faintly on the shelf, as if it knew what it had done. Maybe someone spoofed my network, I said, forcing the words through, or routed through it. Could be anyone, even them. Ellen's voice softened. You think Karen's that desperate? I think she's always been that desperate, I said. She doesn't lose gracefully. I spent the rest of the day writing a statement for my attorney, pacing the small stretch of my apartment until my steps became a looped film reel. Window, sink, door, repeat. The hum of the city outside felt louder than usual, Raleigh pushing on, indifferent to the private wars waged in its shadows. By afternoon, the knock came. 2 officers. Polite, efficient. They handed me a summons to appear at an emergency hearing the following week. I nodded like I was listening, even as my heart thudded against the script I'd written for my life. When they left, I sank onto the couch and stared at my reflection in the dark TV screen. I'd exposed my family, saved my father, destroyed a company, and now I was the one accused of trespassing. Ellen stopped by that night, restless energy buzzing off her. We can trace the login. We just need the metadata. I shook my head. No hacking, not again. We fight this clean. She hesitated, then nodded. You're sure? I'm tired of winning the wrong way, I said. That night, I dreamed of Raleigh Hall again. The bread, the chandelier light, the frozen smile on Karen's face. But this time, when the screen lit up, it wasn't her voice on the audio. It was mine, whispering a confession I didn't remember making. The courthouse the following week felt colder than any place I'd ever filmed. The air conditioning hummed like distant thunder, and everything smelled faintly of paper and nerves. Karen sat across the aisle, all tailored poise and morning colors. Shannon was beside her, mascara perfect again, face unreadable. Dad sat in the back, his posture heavy, as if the bench itself were keeping him upright. The judge's voice cut through the hush. We're here to determine preliminary cause in the matter of Hale versus Hale. That name, mine and theirs, echoed in the wood-paneled room, sounding like a curse that had finally come full circle. Karen's lawyer, a smooth man with a smooth voice, rose first. Your Honor, this is a clear-cut case of unlawful intrusion. Ms. Hale, my client's stepdaughter, accessed private digital property to fabricate defamatory material, disseminated it publicly, and caused irreparable financial harm. His words were clean, rehearsed, perfect for headlines. My attorney, a small woman with sharp eyes named Priya Das, stood calmly. What Ms. Hale exposed wasn't fabrication. It was evidence of financial misconduct, verified by messages, recordings, and witnesses. Furthermore, the alleged intrusion was through an unsecured, shared cloud account that predated any privacy claims. The judge nodded slowly. So we're looking at both ethics and evidence. Proceed. Karen's lawyer gestured toward the projector. Ironic, given our family's history with screens. Let's review Exhibit C, network logs confirming access from Ms. Hale's home IP address 2 nights prior to the exposure event. The logs appeared, columns of numbers and timestamps. And there it was, my address, my timestamp, my apparent guilt. Ellen's nails dug into her own thigh beside me. That's impossible, she whispered. You were with me that night at the studio. We were editing footage. Priya leaned close. We'll call your father next. He requested to testify. My stomach flipped. He did? She nodded. Said he had relevant documentation. Dad walked slowly to the witness stand, each step careful, deliberate. He took the oath with a trembling hand. When he spoke, his voice was steady but worn. I've been advised not to say much, but there's something this court should know. Months before the party, I suspected irregularities in my company's accounts. I hired a private consultant to track activity within my household network. Karen's head snapped toward him. You what? He continued, eyes fixed on the judge. The consultant installed passive monitoring tools on the home Wi-Fi. They used remote access through my daughter's building because she shared the same provider. That's likely the source of the flagged IP. Whispers rippled through the room. Karen's lawyer started to protest, but Dad raised a folder. This contains the investigator's report. It corroborates what my daughter found. The same pattern of document tampering, the same false dates, including signatures entered during times when I was under medical sedation. Karen's composure shattered completely. You're lying, she screamed, standing. You signed those papers. You! Enough, the judge said sharply. Sit down, Mrs. Hale. She sank back, shaking. Shannon stared at her hands, not moving. The judge skimmed the report, then looked up. We'll verify this with forensic analysis, but for now, the evidence supports the defense's position. Charges are suspended pending full investigation. Suspended, not cleared, not safe, but breathing room. Karen's lawyer muttered something about appeals. The judge adjourned. The gavel hit like the punctuation at the end of an exhausting sentence. When I turned, Dad was watching me. Not smiling, not proud, just seeing. In the hallway, Ellen squeezed my arm. You're clear for now, but this isn't over. I know. Karen brushed past us, perfume sharp as cut fruit. She didn't speak, just threw a final look, one that wasn't anger anymore. It was fear. And as she disappeared through the courthouse doors, the echo of her heels felt less like power and more like retreat. But I knew her well enough to understand what that look meant. She'd lost this round. She wasn't done. That night, Raleigh was soaked in rain. Thin, needling rain that made the city glow slick and unreal. I drove without music, windshield wipers whispering like an argument I couldn't stop replaying. The courthouse, the folder, Dad's quiet confession. The consultant used her building's Wi-Fi. He'd known for months that something was wrong, and instead of telling me, he'd turned me into a decoy shield. It explained everything. The phantom login, the IP trace, the document I didn't know about. He hadn't just been protecting me, he'd been using me. By the time I reached my apartment, the rain had turned to mist, the kind that makes streetlights look like ghosts. Ellen was waiting on the stoop, jacket pulled tight, sketchbook clutched like a nervous habit. I heard from Priya, she said as I stepped out of the car. You're technically in the clear, for now. Technically, I repeated. My voice sounded distant, like someone else's. That word is starting to feel like home. Inside, we made tea and didn't drink it. The apartment smelled of damp wool and static. My editing rig still glowed in standby mode, little blue lights like eyes watching. You think he knew everything? Ellen asked finally. He didn't just know, I said. He orchestrated part of it. She blinked. Your dad? He hired that consultant. He let them log through my network. He could have told me before the party, before the lawsuit, but he waited. Maybe he wanted the proof to surface on its own, to make Karen and Shannon implode publicly. Maybe he didn't want blood on his hands, so he used mine. Ellen rubbed her temple. Jesus. I exposed them, I said. But he set the stage. We sat there for a long time, the rain easing outside. Somewhere below, a car alarm chirped and died. At midnight, I opened a folder labeled Tapestry, Rough Cut, my documentary project, the one Susan Clark had commissioned, the one about legacies and truth. Scenes flickered on the monitor, an old woman holding family photos to her chest, a father and son rebuilding a burned-out store, a daughter opening a locked box of letters. Every story in it was about exposure, how telling the truth breaks things before it heals them. I stared at the timeline and realized I wasn't ready to finish it. Not yet. The next morning, I drove back to the lake. Dad was outside, sitting on the porch, fishing rod leaned against the railing. The water was glassy, fog hugging the edges of the trees. You shouldn't have come, he said without turning. I needed to. I stepped closer, my shoes crunching on gravel. You used my IP address. You could have told me. He sighed. I didn't want you involved, but when you went public, I couldn't stay silent. That's not protection, Dad. That's manipulation. He turned then, his face drawn, older than the last time I saw him. Maybe, or maybe it's penance. For what? For raising a daughter who thought she had to burn everything down to be seen. The words hit harder than I expected. He set the rod aside and stood, moving carefully. You were right about Karen, about everything. But the company wasn't the only thing I built wrong. I swallowed. The reversion clause, the one you mentioned at the party, it's real? He nodded and handed me a weathered envelope. It's filed and notarized. If any assets were ever transferred under coercion, they revert to you. I kept it sealed because I hoped I'd never need it. I opened it, my hands trembling. The document was simple, almost painfully so. His signature shaky, but clear. Why tell me now? Because Karen's not done, he said, and I'm tired of watching you fight my battles. He looked out at the water, his reflection wavering. Matthew Stone called me last night, he added. He wants to salvage part of the real estate portfolio. Says there's a path if governance is clean. Is it a trap? Maybe, he said with a faint smile. But it's also a chance. He offered to bring you on as co-consultant. Said he'd seen your film at a festival years ago. The idea of working with Stone, the man who'd dismantled us publicly, felt strange, almost poetic. But there was something else beneath Dad's words, an unspoken plea. Help me fix what's left. I nodded slowly. I'll meet with him. We stood in silence for a while, listening to the soft lap of the lake. It wasn't reconciliation, not exactly, just coexistence. The kind people build after every lie has already been told. Before I left, Dad said quietly, Vesper, your mother, she'd be proud of you, even for the chaos, maybe because of it. It was the closest he'd ever come to saying he loved me. 2 weeks later, the meeting with Matthew Stone took place in a glass-walled office overlooking downtown Raleigh. The skyline shimmered in afternoon haze. He greeted me with a professional nod. You caused quite the stir, Ms. Hale, he said, pouring coffee. Half the city wants to hire you for truth consulting. The other half wants to avoid you. I'm fine being the half people avoid, I said. He chuckled. Fair. I'm not here to offer absolution. I'm here to propose order. He laid out plans. Restructuring, liquidation, public trust initiatives. But the key was governance. Everything transparent. No shadow deals. You'd oversee narrative accountability, he said. A kind of ethical oversight. Documentary meets due diligence. I raised an eyebrow. So you want me to film your cleanup? He smiled. Exactly. I thought of Mom's claws, Karen's forged signature, Dad's trembling hand. Then I thought of truth, not as a weapon, but as a record. I'll do it, I said, but on one condition. Name it. Full access, no censorship, and 10% of any recovered assets go into a scholarship fund for kids studying investigative journalism or film. He considered, then extended his hand. Deal. By spring, my film premiered, Tapestry of Legacies. The theater was packed. Critics, students, strangers who'd followed the scandal. When the credits rolled, the applause was real, not polite. Afterward, a young woman in a denim jacket approached me, eyes bright. Your film made me want to speak up, she said. It hit me like oxygen. Outside, night had settled over the city. I stood under the marquee lights, phone buzzing in my pocket. Karen Hale. I stared at the screen, then hit play voicemail. Vesper, it's me. I'm leaving Raleigh. I don't expect forgiveness, but I need you to know I never meant to destroy your father. I just couldn't stand being invisible. Her voice cracked, then silence. I deleted the message. My heart didn't twist. Not this time. I turned my camera toward the street, lifted it, and clicked. The shot caught the reflection of the marquee in a puddle, the words Tapestry of Legacies shimmering upside down. I smiled. For the first time, my story didn't feel like revenge. It felt like release. A month later, the lake was different. The spring storms had passed, leaving the water calm enough to mirror the sky. I drove out early, before the phones, before the calls, before the city remembered my name again. Dad was already there, sitting on the dock, a thermos of coffee beside him. He looked better, lighter somehow. The deep lines of fatigue that used to bracket his mouth had softened. The tremor in his hand was still there, but faint. Managed. "Morning," he said without turning. "Morning," I replied, lowering myself onto the wood beside him. The planks creaked, remembering every word we'd ever said here. For a few minutes, we didn't talk. We just watched the surface ripple under the soft wind. Somewhere across the lake, a heron lifted off, its reflection breaking cleanly in two. He finally spoke. "Stone's project is moving fast. He wants you in on the second phase." I nodded. "Already reviewing the proposals. He actually listens, which is new for this city." Dad smiled faintly. "You've always had that effect, making powerful people uncomfortable enough to think." I laughed under my breath. "Mom would have liked that version of me." "She would have," he said. "She always said you had her stubbornness. I used to think it would make your life harder." He paused, eyes distant. Maybe it made it real. A quiet fell between us. It wasn't heavy anymore, just full. "I've been thinking about the company," I said finally. "About what it was built on, what it cost. Maybe it shouldn't be resurrected at all. Maybe it should become something else." "Like what?" "Something honest," I said. "Affordable housing, community projects, scholarships, something that gives back what we took." He nodded slowly, eyes glinting with the faintest pride. "Then do it. The reversion clause makes you majority owner now. It's yours to reshape." The words hit harder than I expected, not because of the power, but because of the permission. I reached into my bag and pulled out my camera, the same old model that had followed me since I was 16. "Mind if I film a bit?" He smiled, understanding. "Go ahead." The record light blinked red. I framed the shot. The lake, the trees, his silhouette beside mine. "Tell me what you'd say to Mom if she could see this," I said quietly. He didn't hesitate. "I'd tell her I failed to keep our promise, but our daughter kept it for both of us." The camera caught the reflection of sunlight flickering on the water. For the first time, I didn't need to say anything back. Later that afternoon, I drove into the city for the screening of Tapestry of Legacies at a local university. The students had turned the old lecture hall into a makeshift theater, strings of yellow bulbs, paper programs printed on recycled cardstock. Susan Clark met me at the entrance, her eyes bright. "You ready?" "As I'll ever be," I said. The lights dimmed. The first frame flickered. Grainy footage of my mother holding a camcorder, laughing into the lens. Then my voice, narrating softly. "Every family hides a story. Some hide it out of shame, some out of love. But truth, no matter how painful, doesn't destroy us. It defines what's left standing when everything else falls." The audience was silent, spellbound. When the credits rolled, the applause didn't just sound. It swelled. Raw, human, real. Afterward, a young man approached me, maybe 20. His voice shook a little. "My mom's in a fight with her brothers over our house," he said. "I showed her your film trailer last week. She said it made her feel brave." I smiled, throat tightening. "Then tell her to stay brave." He nodded, eyes wet, and left. Susan appeared beside me, whispering, "You did it, Vesper. You turned pain into purpose." "Maybe," I said, "but it still hurts." "It's supposed to," she replied. "That's how we know it mattered." That night, I drove past Raleigh Hall, the site of everything that had broken and begun again. The once bright building stood dark now, its windows boarded, the marble steps streaked with dust. I parked, got out, and stood in the cool evening air. My camera hung around my neck, steady. The doors were locked, but the glass still reflected the streetlights. I raised the lens and took one last shot, my reflection beside the hollowed hall, past and present sharing the same frame. The shutter clicked, and in that instant, I knew I'd never come back here again. Because the truth wasn't just what I'd exposed that night, it was what I'd built afterward. The silence that came after chaos. The peace earned, not gifted. I whispered to the empty street. I'm done filming pain. Then I smiled. Time to film hope. I got back in the car, rolled down the window, and let the night air in. The city lights blurred behind me as I drove toward whatever came next. And for the first time in my life, the story didn't feel like survival. It felt like freedom.